Derek pulls into the gym parking lot in a blacked-out pickup truck he leases for $890 a month. Priya pulls in 2 spots down in a 2013 Corolla with a cracked side mirror she's been meaning to fix for 3 years. Derek walks in wearing $200 sneakers he bought specifically because they're currently sold out everywhere. Priya walks in wearing a hoodie from a 5K she ran in 2019. If you had to guess which one of them could write a check tomorrow and cover 6 months of expenses without blinking, your brain would say Derek. Your brain would be wrong. My name is Horizon, and today we're talking about the most expensive lie in America, the idea that looking rich and being rich are the same project. They are not. They're not even on the same team. Let's set the two of them up properly because this only works if it's fair. Derek and Priya are coworkers. Same job, same title, same $58,000 salary, same benefits package, same building. On paper, their financial lives should look nearly identical. They don't. Derek spends his money the second it lands, and he spends it in ways other people can see. The truck, the sneakers, the omakase dinner he posts from every other Friday. Priya spends almost nothing anyone would notice. Same paycheck, wildly different lives, and the difference isn't income. It's what each of them is actually buying. Derek is buying a feeling other people have about him for about 4 seconds in a parking lot. Priya is buying her own future in silence with zero audience. Here's where I want to slow down because this is the part everyone gets backwards. We assume the visible signs of money are evidence of money. But they're not a bank statement. They're a costume, and costumes are worn precisely by people who need you to believe something that isn't obviously true on its own. Nobody buys a costume to convince you of something you'd already assumed. You don't need a sign that says, "I'm breathing." You only put up a sign for the thing that's actually in question. There's real data behind this, and it's not subtle. When researchers studied American millionaires directly instead of guessing from the outside, the results embarrassed almost everyone's assumptions. A huge share of actual millionaires had never spent more than a few $100s on a watch in their entire lives. The single most common vehicle among them wasn't a European luxury brand. It was a plain, unremarkable Japanese sedan. Meanwhile, newer data on high earners tells the same story from a different angle. The majority of households pulling in well over $200,000 a year don't drive a luxury car at all. So who's actually buying the luxury cars? Disproportionately, it's people earning far less, financing a status symbol on an income that can't comfortably support it. The badge on the hood isn't proof of wealth. Statistically, it's more often proof of a payment. And the payment is the whole story because nobody actually pays sticker price for the appearance of success. They finance it, one manageable-sounding installment at a time. This is the part that should genuinely bother you. A recent industry survey found that a huge share of people earning between $300,000 and $500,000 a year describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. On $400,000, that's not a typo, and it's not a rare outlier. It's a higher rate of paycheck to paycheck living than people making a fraction of that. The people who look the most arrived are, statistically, some of the most financially fragile people in the country, and they're fragile in a very specific, very avoidable way. They didn't lose their money to an emergency. They spent it on purpose in public to be seen doing it. So how does a smart, otherwise reasonable person end up here? Not through one bad decision, but through a slow ratchet with a name. Psychologists call it lifestyle creep. A few hundred years ago, a French writer received a beautiful new robe as a gift. Suddenly, his old furniture looked shabby sitting next to it, so he replaced the desk. Then the chair didn't match the desk. Then the art on the wall didn't match the chair. He spent himself into a mess chasing a standard that one unplanned gift had quietly set for him. That's the entire mechanism, and it hasn't changed in a few hundred years. You get a raise, the car suddenly feels beneath you. You get the car, the apartment suddenly feels beneath the car. Every upgrade doesn't satisfy you. It just moves the finish line and hands you a new, more expensive definition of normal. And here's the cruelest part. The upgrade doesn't even make you happy for long. There's a name for this too, hedonic adaptation. You buy the thing, you get a real spike of joy, and within a matter of weeks your brain quietly files the new thing under baseline and So you go looking for the next spike. The treadmill speeds up. You never arrive anywhere because arriving was never actually the destination. Spending was. Let's put real numbers on Derek's life, because vague description is easy to shrug off and math is not. The average new vehicle payment in America right now sits around $750 a month. A meaningful share of new buyers are signing up for payments north of $1,000 monthly. To make that number feel survivable, dealers stretch loans out to 7 years, so buyers are paying off a truck that will be second-hand before the loan is. And because vehicles lose value fast while loans stay flat, roughly a third of people trading in a car right now owe more on it than it's actually worth. They're underwater, often by several $1,000s, and the fix almost everyone reaches for is rolling that debt into the next loan, on the next truck, at a slightly worse rate. Derek isn't a cautionary tale because he's reckless. He's a cautionary tale because he's completely normal, and normal in this specific arena is a financial trap with a payment plan attached. Now here's where it gets genuinely strange, because this isn't just about cars and watches anymore. It reaches further than that. Researchers dug into real bankruptcy records in Canada, looking specifically at neighborhoods where someone had won a significant lottery prize. What they found should stop you cold. The bigger the prize next door, the more the neighbors filed for bankruptcy. Not the winner, the people who lived beside the winner. And when researchers looked at exactly what those bankrupt neighbors had been buying in the run-up to filing, it wasn't savings, it wasn't invisible investments, it was driveway items. Cars, boats, anything visible from the street. When the people next door suddenly appeared to have more, the response wasn't to quietly build more of their own wealth. That's the entire disease in one study. It's not about your income. It's about whoever happens to be parked next to you. So that's Derek's road, fully mapped. Now let's actually walk Priya's, because it's almost insultingly simple. Take that $890 truck payment Derek's making. Now imagine instead that money goes into a basic index fund every single month and just sits there, untouched, for 30 years. At an ordinary long-run market return, that redirected truck payment alone grows into something over $1 million. Same amount of money, same 30 years, two completely different endings, and the only variable that changed was whether that money went into an asset that grows or a depreciating object parked outside a gym. And here's the detail almost nobody emphasizes enough. When you're young, the specific return your money earns barely matters compared to one thing, your savings rate, the percentage of your paycheck you actually keep instead of spend. Someone who keeps a large share of their income can reach real financial freedom in well under 2 decades regardless of what the market does in any given year, simply because they need so little to live on, and they're stacking money that fast. The entire game in your 20s and 30s was never about picking the perfect stock. It's the deeply unglamorous, completely unphotographable act of not spending the money in the first place. And the timing punishes hesitation more than almost anything else in finance. Wait 5 years to start, and you don't just lose 5 years of contributions. You lose everything those specific early dollars would have compounded into for. Start putting away a few $100s a month at 30, and you can realistically land near $1 million by retirement. Start that exact same habit at 35, and you can land a few $100,000 short. Same monthly discipline. A 6-figure gap. The dollars you invest in your 20s are the most powerful dollars you'll ever hold, and almost nobody treats them that way, because in your 20s, looking modest feels like losing. If you want the cleanest real-world proof that this isn't theoretical, look at the people who have actually done it at scale. Wearing plain clothes, living in the same house long after they could have bought an island. That's not thriftiness for its own sake. That's the tell. When someone has actually won the game, they stop needing the costume, because the costume was only ever for people trying to convince a stranger of something. The people who no longer need to convince anyone simply stop performing. Now I have to complicate this because if I stopped here, I'd be selling you half a story. Looking modest on purpose, when you're actually secure, is a genuine advantage. But being poor, not by choice, is one of the most expensive things you can be in this country, There's a well-documented pattern sometimes called the poverty premium. If you're broke and need a small loan to cover rent, a payday lender will happily hand you one at an interest rate that can run into the hundreds of percent annually. If your credit is damaged and you need a car to get to the job that pays your bills, the exact same vehicle that costs a comfortable buyer a low single-digit interest rate, the system that quietly rewards people who can afford to look modest punishes hard the people who never had a choice in how they looked at all. It shows up in places you can't opt out of too. Two drivers with identical records and identical cars can pay wildly different insurance rates depending on their credit history and their zip code, sometimes more than double for the same coverage. You get charged extra, in other words, for the crime of already not having enough margin. An economist named Thorstein Veblen wrote about the flip side of this over a century ago, coining a term for spending built specifically to display wealth. What he didn't dwell on was the mirror image. The poor get taxed automatically just for showing up looking like a risk. So the honest version of this video isn't looking poor is a hack. It's that looking modest is a genuine advantage only once you've already built the safety net underneath it. Priya isn't winning because she owns nothing. She's winning because what she owns is invisible on purpose, sitting in an account instead of a driveway. Which brings us to right now, because this exact tension is playing out across every feed you scroll. There's a real growing pushback against flashy spending online, people proudly showing off old phones and years-old sneakers. On the surface, that looks like the healthiest financial shift in a generation. And yet, at the very same time, a large share of young adults report feeling constantly behind financially, no matter what their actual bank balance says, because they're measuring their real, boring, actual life against a feed engineered to look like everyone else already made it. And here's the twist that catches even people who think they've escaped the trap entirely. The obvious status symbols didn't disappear, they just got quieter. The newest version of looking rich is deliberately logo-free, a plain sweater that happens to cost more than a car payment, legible only to the handful of people who already know what it costs. It looks humble. It isn't. It's the same performance with the volume turned down, and it might be the most expensive version of the game yet, because now you're paying extra specifically so that nobody can prove you paid at all. So let me leave you with the actual permission this video is built around, because it's simpler than any budgeting spreadsheet. You're allowed to look like less than you are. You're allowed to drive the ordinary car, wear the ordinary hoodie, and let a stranger in a parking lot draw the wrong conclusion about you for exactly as long as it takes them to walk into the gym and forget you exist. Every single dollar you don't spend convincing that stranger you're doing fine is a dollar that's actually, quietly, making you fine. Derek and Priya will pull into that same parking lot next year, and the year after that, Derek will still be making a payment on a truck that's worth less than it was the year before. Priya will still be driving the Corolla with the cracked mirror she genuinely could fix now and just doesn't bother to, because she's watching a number in an account that Derek will not see in his lifetime at this rate, and nobody in that parking lot will ever know the difference. That's not an accident. That's the entire point. She traded the 4 seconds of applause for the freedom underneath it, and it turns out the applause was never going to pay for anything anyway.